Marilyn Monroe. You hear the name, and an image just pops into your head, right? That platinum blonde hair, the beauty mark, the iconic white dress. We all feel like we know her. But in this explainer, we're going to look past the legend to find the brilliant, incredibly determined woman who built that icon from the ground up. First up, of course, there's the image that pretty much defined an entire era, the ultimate Hollywood bombshell. The star whose sexuality was front and center in movies and, on the cover of the very first issue of Playboy.
Then you've got the character she absolutely perfected, that charming, kinda naive showgirl who famously sang that diamonds are a girl's best friend. This persona, from movies like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, is what made her a megastar.
And finally, there's the image that just won't fade. The face Andy Warhol turned into pop art, the legend whose style is still copied decades and decades later. She is, without a doubt, one of the most recognizable people of the 20th century. A sex symbol, a dumb blonde, a tragic icon. Those are the easy labels. But was that the whole picture? Not even close. The reality is so much more complex and, honestly, so much more impressive. Okay, let's dive into this. So to understand Marilyn, you really have to meet the girl she was before all the fame, Norma Jeane Mortenson. Her story doesn't start on some glamorous soundstage. It starts with a whole lot of instability and a desperate search just to find a safe place to land. I mean, just look at this timeline. It shows you how chaotic her early life really was. Her mother gets institutionalized, and suddenly Norma Jeane is a ward of the state, just shuffled between an orphanage and a dozen different homes. And that marriage at 16, that wasn't about romance. It was pure survival. It was her only way to avoid being sent right back to that orphanage. So what do you do when the world around you is that grim? You invent a new one. Monroe said it herself. Her tough childhood is exactly what pushed her toward acting. The movies were her escape, a place where she could become someone else, someone who was actually in control. It wasn't just a dream, it was a strategy. And this brings us to one of the biggest misconceptions about her. The icon Marilyn Monroe didn't just happen. She was meticulously built piece by piece by the one person who knew exactly what she was doing, Norma Jeane herself. This wasn't luck. This was a full-on game plan. Step 1, get noticed as a model. Step 2, craft the image, change the hair, get on dozens of magazine covers. Step 3, lock down a studio contract and create her new name. And then came the real work, studying acting like her life depended on it, and networking relentlessly to make sure all the right people knew exactly who she was. Now, a key part of that creation was, of course, the dumb blonde persona. It was a brilliant performance that made her a household name and a box office juggernaut, but it also became a trap. The studio saw a gold mine, and they just wanted to keep digging, no matter what she actually wanted for her own career. It was a golden cage, and she was going to have to fight her way out. All that frustration built up to what might be her greatest achievement, and believe me, it had nothing to do with her looks. This is the story of how Marilyn Monroe took on the entire Hollywood studio system and won. Okay, so picture this. By the mid-50s, she's arguably the biggest movie star in the world, but her contract hadn't been updated since 1950. She was making a tiny fraction of what her co-stars were making and had zero say in her films. The head of her studio just saw her as a cash cow for silly comedies. And here's the showdown. The studio orders her to do another comedy she hated, and she just says no. So Fox suspends her, thinking she'll come crawling back. Instead, she does something almost nobody, especially an actress, did back then. She packed up, moved to New York, started her own production company, and began studying serious method acting. She was betting everything on herself. And after a year-long legal battle, the studio caved. This number, $400,000, was the value of the new 4-film contract she won. But even more important than the money, the deal gave her what she'd really been fighting for, the right to choose her own projects and her own directors. She had taken control. And the results? Well, they speak for themselves. With this new power, she started pursuing more serious, more challenging roles. Her performance in Bus Stop got her a Golden Globe nomination, and critics finally had to admit she was a real actress. Then, for the classic Some Like It Hot, she won the Golden Globe. She proved she was way more than a pretty face. She was a world-class talent. So why does her story still feel so powerful today? Well, because when you look past the tragedy of her ending, you find a true pioneer. A woman who fought for respect in a system that was basically designed to deny it to her.
Her life is really a masterclass in resilience and strategy. She teaches us about the power of creating your own identity, the importance of fighting for your professional worth, and the sheer intelligence it takes to play a part so well that the whole world mistakes it for who you really are. These aren't just lessons for Hollywood, right? They're lessons for life.
And nothing, I mean nothing, captures her sharp, self-aware understanding of her position better than this line right here. It's a quote from her character, but it was Monroe herself who insisted on adding it to the script. She knew exactly what game she was playing, acting the part of the dumb blonde while being the smartest person in the room. Of course, her life was cut tragically short. She died at just 36 from a drug overdose, and her death was ruled a probable suicide. For a long time, the ending of her story has really overshadowed the incredible life she lived, often just framing her as a victim. But maybe it's time for a different perspective. Marilyn Monroe was first and foremost an actress. So that leaves us with one last question. What if the naive, vulnerable, dumb blonde wasn't who she was at all, but was simply her most convincing and most successful performance of all?